So welcome, Elena. Welcome, Anna.
Hi.
All well?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good. Thank you.
Good. We're today we're going to be talking, and we're going to run through a few things. Really special episode today around femtech in particular, or female health in particular. And both of you have stacks of experience within that market. I suppose the best place to start here would be to ask for an introduction in who you are and what you do. So,
Sure.
Anna, please kick us off.
Hi. So I'm Anna Butterworth. I am the founder of the very first trend forecasting and creative agency focused on femtech and women's health. So Ultraviolet was started in 2017 as really a response to the challenges that brands and founders were having pitching female and women's health brands and femtech brands to market and taking them to market. I had a lot of challenges in my first femtech job at LV, and I saw a lot of the same challenges were being met in multiple different brands and businesses. So I started the agency really just to focus on marketing specifically within that space. And then in 2021, we diversified and we launched the trend forecasting arm of the business. So we're the only trend forecasters in women's health and femtech at the moment. So we have a really, really unique view on what the future of this category is going to look like and what the future female consumer is going to be looking for. And that's really where we spend all of our time now.
Fantastic. And Elena, yourself, please.
So I'm the managing director of the Salve Health. We are a medical affairs specialist consultancy, and it is a bit of a niche market. So we work on the non-promotional side of the life sciences industry. So we've got pharmaceutical companies, biotechs, device companies as our clients. And we work wherever there is clinical trial data or disease awareness or medical education that needs to be communicated to doctors. So women's health is just one part of our kind of therapy area makeup, but it's one as a women-owned business. And we're one of the very few women-owned businesses in this sector. We kind of naturally moved into that area and really feel it's an area that is kind of has a bit of a lack of focus, particularly in the medical affairs sphere. So yeah, we're really happy to be here. We got our B Corp certification last year, which we are super happy about. So hoping to kind of grow the area and grow awareness of the area.
And for both of you, as femtech or female health as a whole always been a passion? Anna, you obviously started off in the sort of marketing space within this world. Has it always been something you've wanted to do? Has it always been in the back of your mind to drive into this space?
No, not really at all, actually. It was a kind of a happy accident, like a really, really happy accident. So I had started in a PR agency and then went into a children's charity. And then when I was job hunting around the time that closed down, I had always had a really strong interest in the marketing of sexual health brands, not specifically women's health, but like sex tech, sex toys, that sort of thing. Because I just found there was this huge gap in the market. They were either sort of really overtly sexual and like boudoir, or they were just really trashy and tacky, and there was just nothing speaking to me. So I'd always had this kind of interest in sex tech and sexual wellness. And then I saw this brand that was advertising for a digital marketing specialist that was essentially this device that you put inside your vagina and you can play games on your phone with it, which turned out to be LV's pelvic floor trainer. But I had no idea from the health side why this was so important. I had no idea really. I'd heard of pelvic floor in a Pilates class, but I didn't really know why it was important. I didn't really have an understanding of the intricate difference it would make having a strong or weak pelvic floor to your, not just your physical health, but your mental and emotional health as well, particularly if you have bladder issues. So working at LV just opened me up to this huge world of women's health, and particularly the disparity of our understanding and our education in women's health. I was in my mid-20s when I got there, and I didn't even realise that we had 4 stages to our menstrual cycle. I thought we had a period and then 3 weeks of nothing. And I was like, how am I only just learning this? Why had I never heard of a luteal phase before? And just being in that space, and this was very, very early days of femtech. The term hadn't really been coined yet anyway, but we were all kind of figuring it out. I was meeting so many other founders and marketers and innovators and people who were just so passionate about women's health. And it just became my life's mission and my life's work to improve this area, to improve understanding, to improve research and education, and also to improve accessibility for people globally. So that's really where I've now it's my life's mission. I didn't go into it thinking that.
Yourself, Elena?
Yeah.
Similar sort of story?
Very similar, because traditionally medical affairs agencies have worked in all therapy areas, and certainly my key therapy area in my career was diabetes. It didn't really have a women's health angle at all. And I would say probably like many women, you kind of hit a point where you've had children and you are suddenly immersed in this kind of medical kind of system that you've never really had to interact with before. And I came out with a very profound sense that I was being underserved. And I'm a fairly well-educated, knowledgeable person working in healthcare, and I couldn't navigate it. So what chances anyone else has with less knowledge than perhaps I have?
Yeah,
it's crazy. The communication was poor. The conflicting advice, just plain wrong. And that's when kind of my training in kind of evidence-based data, communicating that well to people who perhaps don't have that knowledge. And I really saw the disparity there. So yeah, naturally, we, both myself and my business partner, Liz, have moved towards women's health because we see firsthand where the gaps are.
And your background from an educational point of view, what is that, please?
So I did a degree in molecular biology, and I did a year out at AstraZeneca as well as part of that. And then I worked at Imperial College London. I did a PhD in a neglected tropical disease. And I just knew I didn't want to be a bench scientist, but I was always really interested in the communication of science. So I did like a couple of weeks at the BBC, working on a program as a researcher during my PhD, just tried to get as much experience in the kind of communication world. And then this little niche industry called Medcoms kind of appeared. I saw an advert for it in our careers office, and applied as a medical writer. So I started as a medical writer. I've actually got a bit of a passion for kind of managing people, managing accounts. So I've ended up on the client services side, but yeah, I just love communicating science to people.
So where are we today with women's health? Where are we? I mean, I've read your Trends Forecast document, which was amazing. And it gave me the inspiration to do mine. I'd be interested to know how long that took as well. But where are we today with women's health?
I mean, it's very hard to take a snapshot and say anything too positive, unfortunately. You know, we've made huge strides, that we're obviously making really big dent in it, but there is so far to go. You know, we see, for example, your experience with your pregnancy and your pre and postnatal experience is shocking. In the UK, in the US, we actually have cases of 5 times more Black women will die in childbirth in the UK and the US than white women. Why are we seeing that just in the Western world? It makes absolutely no sense, right? There is so far to go still. You know, I have friends constantly who are, you know, in the dark, unknown. We have all of these aches, pains, weird things that happen to us, the way that our body responds to drugs, to chemicals, to treatments. We don't understand how women's bodies are working when they're healthy, let alone when they're unhealthy, how those different things interact with each other, and then how all of these things that we've, you know, developed and created, like drugs, like lifestyles, like everything else, how all of this is impacting us individually. And I think the reason why we're in this position now where I say it's very hard to say anything positive is because every single time we make a step forward in women's health, we realise that there is another massive chasm that we need filling in a way, and we need to understand. So the more we learn, the more we realise we don't know as well.
Yeah, you can't unsee it once you've seen the gap. And I mean, a really good book to read is Invisible Women by Caroline Criado-Perez. And the pharmaceutical sector chapter, if that is your field, will give you the rage, because it's a real call to action about the design of products, medicines, through a woman's through a women's health lens.
And Unwell Women by Eleanor Claycourt as well, which is also about how the medical industry has just basically been designed by men for men.
Yeah.
And there was this huge amount of women's health knowledge. I mean, it was basic and it was primitive knowledge, but it was in the hands of women. It was by women for women. And as particularly as the Victorian era and the Enlightenment, quote unquote Enlightenment, came along, where essentially we took the medical industry into labs with lab coats, and it was controlled by men. We lost a lot of that information and we lost a lot of that historical understanding. So when we are now looking at women's health, we're doing it a little bit from a standing start, maybe not from today, but from when we opened up that door. So there's a lot to unlearn, basically, and relearn.
Just come back ever so slightly from me, and a comment about more black women, and the sort of statistic around that. You'll have to maybe repeat it for me.
Sure.
But why is that? Is that a social piece? Or?
There are a number of factors. Again, women from different backgrounds have got a different makeup. I don't want to talk too clinically about this because I am not a clinician. You might know better. But for example, on a very basic level, black women might be more susceptible to different kinds of diseases, autoimmune issues, etc., than white women. Just different. But then also there are a lot of social factors as well. And there is this historical challenge that we're bringing into the medical space that I think is inherently racist and inherently biased. It's inherently sexist and it's inherently racist. And so if you have multiple factors that are working against you in terms of intersectional, being an intersectional minority, you are going to see the worst of that, unfortunately. There are studies that show that if you are seen by somebody who represents your social cultural identity on a very basic level, if a black woman is seen by a black female doctor, she is more likely to have a better outcome, a better medical outcome. And it's the same from LGBTQ background. If you are from an LGBTQ background, if you're seen by somebody in that world or who identifies as LGBTQ or who is a very active ally, you're more likely to have a positive outcome, medical outcome.
Would you have a preference as a female to see a female practitioner?
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the studies, often female physicians are more empathic. They listen better. They recognise if you're seeing a woman to women, there's an argument that you will empathise with that. If there's a lot of data on the gender pain gap, you'll be listened to. And there's some really interesting data in cardiology where if male physicians spend time with female physicians, they are better kind of made up to treat other women. So yeah, it's about learning from a particular population and what their needs are.
Why do you think it's 2024, right? We're evolved, or we've got the power of knowledge and where we're at now. Why is there still this huge gap, in your opinion? I think you alluded to slightly data loss and pieces like that a moment ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't have the research, we don't have the data for from a very, very basic perspective. We aren't studying how specific diseases, issues, lifestyle factors are differently or disproportionately affecting women. We only started including women in clinical research in 1993. So we lost decades and decades of data and of the clinical research. And ultimately, it is harder and it is more complicated because there could be factors that impact how we metabolize, for example, a particular drug based on where we are in our menstrual cycle.
Distribution of fat,
age, menopause stage, life stage. There are so many
size. There's so many factors.
Many factors, and we're not being counted in that. And so if we're not being talked about in the clinical research when you're doing your medical studies and medical research, you're not thinking about women in a distinct way, in a unique way. And there is still just that massive disparity, that massive issue.
I think there's always been a kind of a view that women's health has been only about your kind of reproductive organs as well. And that's a very kind of ancient philosophy. It goes kind of right back to Aristotle, where we're really viewed according to our kind of reproduction capacity. Whereas, as Anna was saying, it's about people's physiology as well as the way that their gender intersects with kind of society. But there are different outcomes for women, but the data hasn't been treated in the right way. So there might be any number of products, medicines that if you analysed it by sex, you would find differences. And there's a huge, data sets that could be reanalysed, that historic data, and just have a look at where the differences are between the sexes.
Yeah. And actually, that's an interesting point when we talk about the future of women's health and the future of this category is there are existing data sets that aren't being analysed, and there are new AI tools that are being brought in order to be able to reanalyze existing data sets, because obviously that's much quicker and much cheaper than building out a whole new study. So we are going to see a little bit more movement in that space, but ultimately, we do need to see more research. And that's why I'm sure you saw in the report, there are communities like Athena DAO, which is a DAO, which is a decentralized authoritarian organization, which is looking at how we can invest in new clinical trials, new clinical research, often led by younger female scientists who traditionally find it much harder to get funding and much harder to get published, which is another issue. This is a very multi-layered challenge, right, and a multi-layered issue that is deeply entrenched in every layer of our society. And they're also allowing women to invest in and gain benefits financially as well. So there are movements in the space, but it's slow. And like I said, every time we learn something new, we realise how much more there is to do.
You definitely need new data though, won't you? Because I guess on those old data sets, there still be a bias in terms of like ethnic communities and different from people backgrounds. There'd be a bias in that, weren't they?
Yeah,
we were talking about recruitment earlier before we started.
Absolutely.
Is there still a challenge in the industry, isn't there?
I think there is. I mean, if you take diabetes, the data sets that we were working on in kind of the 2000s, they're all like 50% male, female in those data sets. There might be a very much smaller proportion of ethnic minority patients, and I think that is still a problem. But you could go back and look at any of the data where you've got, especially at phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 1 is trickier because that is still a large majority male patients. But there's a lot of data that you could go back. It's about being powered correctly though, and having the right number of patients, because when you start splitting up by populations and you get down below a certain number, the reliability of the data, it gets less. So designing a trial from the outset to have the right number of patients so that downstream you can disaggregate that data and say something meaningful about that.
Interesting piece there on the sort of AI aspects, because is that going to solve it based on, is AI itself not biased at the moment?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yep.
It's not going to solve anything, but it will help. It will help to move the needle in the right direction.
Yeah, because you've got about 60, 70 years, haven't you, to catch up?
Yeah, there are some really
That's an Excel spreadsheet, that isn't it?
There are some really good organisations looking at that. They, like the Turing Institute, is specifically looking at bias in AI and how to ensure that women aren't disadvantaged through the training of those large language models. So I think it's moving in the right direction. We just need that to be recognised. And I think the US have some really nice guidelines in place. I've seen kind of less emphasis on it in the UK and EU guidelines that have been coming out.
What is that you're working on, by the way, Phil?
It's a remarkable. I just bought one. I love it because I kept losing my notepad, which was really annoying.
It's effectively a simulated pencil.
Yeah.
But it stops the distraction of an iPad. I tend to find if I'm using an iPad to take my notes, A, I'm writing on glass, but B, I'll just end up on TikTok watching Rockstar and his dog videos.
Very smart.
Seen his writing?
It's only neat when I take my time.
I was going to say that's the neatest. I thought that was text.
That's because it's typed.
Oh yeah, and you can turn it into text, which is quite useful.
Oh, it is.
All right.
That's a reel, by the way.
Mine's chicken scratch. Honestly, I can't read my own writing.
I can't read mine.
I love that term. chicken scratch.
It is chicken scratch.
It's a new term. I know.
What is this chicken scratch? Elena, great point or note you've made there. Trial design and how results are analysed. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So trials have traditionally had kind of a group of patients that have been exposed to a drug, and those results, the efficacy results, the tolerability results, would have been averaged out the other end. So you get a complete kind of homogenous set of efficacy and tolerability results. What we're saying in women's health is we need to look at clinical trial data through a gender responsive lens. So that's ensuring in the trial design that you've got enough men and women recruited to enable the results to be split at the end, and then still have enough people, recruits, to say something meaningful statistically about those data. It's about thinking about the socioeconomic profile of the people that you're recruiting, making sure your recruitment methodology is robust enough to encourage people to attend. And that's a lot of that is kind of behavioural science, the way in which we communicate to particular populations to encourage them to take part in a clinical trial. But for me, the biggest benefit in improving clinical trials would come with disaggregating the data at the end. So you're saying something about the way that drugs interact in a woman's body differently to a man's body. And there are physiological differences. I think that there might in some cases be little difference, but at least we would have been able to say that that's been looked at. Fab, you can have the drug dosed at the same rate or amount for men and women. But often drugs are being dosed at too high a level for women because we are slightly smaller than men. It might be that there's a different side effect profile for women. That's never called out. So there are, the trial design, I think, is really important. We just have to look through it through a gender lens.
There's the depth of that. Forgive me for what may be a very simple way of looking at this, but what about off-the-shelf type medicines as well? Is that a similar sort of thought process?
Oh, undoubtedly. Yeah, absolutely.
So you're talking like your paracetamols, your Brufens and Nurofens. You know, we all take one tablet, don't we, at the end of the day, or two tablets, however it might look. But is that still the information that could be provided from that? Would you separate that out into male and female? I would. I mean, there's a lot of long-term safety data with ibuprofen and paracetamol, things that are OTC now. So I think if they've got that far, there's usually probably not enough reason to split the dose. But if you've got, really sort of sensitive, targeted drugs that are coming through that clinical trial process, then you do have to look at it in order to say something meaningful. And so that consumers are reassured that they're taking a correct dose, or that they're not going to be impacted unfavorably by side effects that don't apply to them.
So let's talk about business. It's a tough time at the moment. Anna, where are you with your business? What's the plans for what's the next 2 years look like?
So my business is in a really interesting phase at the moment because I pivoted towards trend forecasting. I added the trend forecasting element in 2021 and have been slowly migrating over to exclusively trend forecasting during that time. And we were actually talking earlier, I've also got a 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old. So the last 2-3 years have been
carnage,
quite busy.
Good luck.
Yes. I'm very tired. So the business has been very much focused on me delivering. So low stakes and very much focused on, repositioning the business and figuring out really how we grow and build as a trend forecasting agency now. So where we're at, my youngest is turning 1 this weekend. So we are very much able to kind of put the gas on and expand now. So by the end of this year, we'll have 2 new hires. And I mean, we've always been a global agency anyway, but things are really accelerating at an incredible pace. So we've been keeping things ticking along for the last couple of years, and now it's going stratospheric.
How do you find the balance? How do you
The
short time I've known
real.
you from like 1 or 2 calls? Your time management, you nailed that, haven't you?
Yes.
Did we get told off when we were?
Yeah, we got told off.
Yes.
I've not got mugged now, guys. Come on.
Yeah, I have a hard stop, and I will shut you up if I need to. That's essentially what I have to do. You know, I have limited time. I really, really enjoy my children. I really enjoy spending time with them. And one of the things that as a agency founder and as, you know, an owner and a woman, I really find it very important that I'm able to have control of my time and where I put my energy. And I want to be able to spend time with them. I find this time really exhausting.
You can't buy it back.
You can't buy it back, and it's really precious to me. So it's very, very important to me that I get really dedicated and focused and quality time with them throughout the week. But it's really important that I keep very quality focused time on my work. I love what I do. Like, this is my absolute passion. It doesn't feel like work to me. This is not it's not a job. This is not a chore. I love it. I've never stopped working. I was, you know, sending emails in labour. I was working.
What?
Yeah. She came early. What could I do? I wasn't planning. I thought she'd come later. I was like, it's my first child. I'll have a few weeks.
Stagger a minute, kid. I've got to.
No, I had stuff to do.
Multitasking.
I was on the ball, sending some emails. I mean, it's been really, really, really challenging, and I don't want to sugarcoat what a physical and emotional drain it's been. That's a podcast for another time, but I think it's very, very important that we don't try and push women to think that they can do it all, because it's not easy, but it's just something that I've chosen to do, and I've chosen to do in this way. So being very strict on my time management is one of those things. Yeah.
Has there been a historical sort of stigma with women are better at multitasking because of that mentality that you can do it all?
I don't know, but it does make us very efficient. But we do need the support of other halves, friends, family. Yeah. You can't do it alone. You can do a lot, but you can't do it alone. And I echo everything Anna said about trying to be a parent and juggle a business as well. Mm-hmm. It is tough, but it's also hugely enjoyable and really rewarding.
Yeah. It's very hard to not reply to emails when they're coming in and you see something exciting. And sometimes you do just have to deal with it. And sometimes it is very difficult having to pull away. But that's also why I separate and I leave the house when I work. And it's a very clear differentiation for me now. Because it used to be much more merged. I was working from home. I was looking after the baby. And I found that having a much clearer distinction helps me as well. Keep my sanity.
So
a bit.
Slightly reverse of that. I do work from home. We've got a remote agency, but my children are slightly older than Anna's. But we made a very conscious decision to be a remote agency. Post-pandemic, it was a brilliant time for us to launch because everyone was set up for remote working. But it means we can have really experienced medcoms professionals who are probably all at a similar stage of their careers to me. I've got 20 years medcoms experience behind me, but I've also got a young family. Working from home gives me the flexibility, and it gives my team the flexibility to be on it in a much more efficient way. And I was having to spend like an hour in the car each way to commute before. I'm not having to do that. That's 2 hours extra I can spend either on my business or with my family. So yeah, we think the value to our clients is we don't have those overheads of running an office, and you've got really experienced people. So it should be a win-win for everybody. And that's kind of very much why we wanted to go down the B Corp route as well, because that is about your people, your culture, able to serve your clients in the best way.
What is B Corp? Sorry, I've heard of it. I just don't know it.
So the B Corp movement is about business for good, and it's about measures of business success beyond profit. So that be that environmental, be that community impact, be that governance. And the B Corp certification means that you have been assessed on those pillars of business, of better business, and you've met those high standards. So those values, that kind of better business movement, really ticked all our boxes when we wanted to launch business. And for a startup, it's fantastic. If you want to be a B Corp, you have to go through a process called the B Impact Assessment. And any business can do the B Impact Assessment. You don't have to be going for B Corp. You can log on and give yourself a measure of your kind of business success using that framework. And it's really helpful for startups. Mm. Here's a framework to be a really good business. Mm. So yeah, we went down that route wholesale.
And from an operational point of view, have you found that that's had an impact on your sort of, I suppose, image with regard to clientele that you are targeting?
Yeah, I mean, just from a general, that helps our clients recognise that we do business well. We have kind of robust systems in place across all the measures that B Corp assess you on. It also helps with things like when we get a request for a proposal in, we can kind of tick one box on the B Corp front rather than having to submit loads and loads of data. So efficiency-wise, it's been quite helpful. And also from a social impact point of view, I think it helps our life science clients with their ESG goals and objectives. So we do 10% of all our MedComs work is for not-for-profit, and we do that either pro bono or at cost. And that was a really important part of setting up a business. We hadn't found that in other businesses. That wasn't a priority for other businesses, but it was a really important part for us. And we've been working mainly with women's health, not-for-profit organisations. So it's been hugely fulfilling from a passion point of view as well.
Are there a lot of not-for-profit women's health businesses out there?
Yeah, there are dedicated women's health organisations. So we've been working with Wellbeing of Women, but there are also women's health elements to traditionally not women's health disease areas. So we've been working with Asthma and Lung UK, looking at their Asthma is Worse for Women campaign. So some of the data that underpins why asthma is worse for women, why they have worse exacerbations. And yeah, just supporting some of the evidence base and the data behind that.
Just coming back to you a second, Anna, please. Global agency. You've always been a global agency. Do you find a particular market is more popular, or you find yourself working within a particular region across the globe more than any other?
So my home market's the UK and the US. Secondary market is the EU. In the UK, we tend to be much, much more open to new and interesting innovations. And actually particularly the way that we think and we talk about our health conditions is very different in the UK versus on the continent. And it always has been. And there's marketed differences between every single country. But the UK does have a very, very distinct way of talking about women's health and engaging with women's health brands. So lots of European companies that I work with actually start in the UK. They start selling in the UK first because we tend to be more open to new ideas, new brands, new offerings before spreading to the rest of Europe. So they've always been quite distinct, actually.
Is Germany a big market as well?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. And sex tech as well, obviously. Great.
The Germans, they're brilliant for it. Yes.
Yeah, they've got one of the biggest sex toy companies in the world.
What's an emerging market? Because there's areas of the world where women's health has been underserved, obviously, even more.
Yeah, of course. So obviously in the global south, there's huge disparities and huge distinctions. Actually, there is a really exciting femtech community emerging in Africa across the continent. And I'm working with a couple of really, really interesting brands and individuals there. And in our newest report, so we're actually launching the very first 10-year forecast. It's actually an 11-year forecast in June for Femtech Futures 2035. And within that, we're going to have a spotlight on Africa. So we're working with a couple of specialists and experts on the continent to help us understand really where the very exciting areas are, what the exciting brands are. And I'm also very closely working with Femtech Asia on understanding the markets there. So I've worked with Singaporean companies quite closely, but there's a really exciting Femtech community in Japan. China is obviously a really, really interesting market when it comes to women's health, because there's such a unique situation that's happening there, particularly within the fertility space, with their aging population, with their working population, with the urbanization of their population. There's some really, really not unusual, but really exciting changes and differences that are happening in China as well.
Isn't it? There's the women population there's decreasing, isn't it? There's, from my understanding as well.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I don't know that demographic data.
But I guess in Africa, Nigeria is a growing population, isn't it? It's a great opportunity as well.
Yeah. So there's what's really interesting about Africa is the age of the population is so much younger than any other continent. The under 25, I don't know the stats, so I'm not going to attempt to relay them now. But the under 25 population is just growing at a much quicker rate than anywhere else in the world. So there's a really, really interesting, change there that's happening, which obviously creates opportunity as well.
Interesting, because I'm just looking at some statistics here from an analysis report, and you've got North America being 51% of the distribution of Femtech companies.
Yeah,
Europe 27%, which I presume here includes the UK at this moment in time. But coming back to your point on the sort of Africa focus and Asia in particular, Africa is 2%.
Yeah.
Asia 9%.
Yeah.
Latin America 2%. Australia and Oceania 3%. Quite low, isn't it, for these?
Of course it is, yeah. I mean, if you think about the fact that you have to, in order to create a Femtech company, right, I would hazard a guess that most of those 51% of those companies that are in America are founded by an individual, right? So in order to found a business, almost certainly that it's a woman who's a founder, right? So that person has to have funding, they have to have education, they have to have the ability, they have to have the time in order to do that. And funding is a huge, huge challenge. Women get 2% of funding. Mm-hmm. Black women get less than 0.2% of funding, right? So those statistics are not at all surprising to me. When I'm talking about emerging markets, these are emerging.
Yeah, we'd love to be shocked.
Yeah, I know, but we're not.
Yeah, listen, I'm shocked because, again,
I hadn't heard that stat. That's crazy.
That is phenomenal. We go back to sort of episode 1 and speaking to obviously Priyanka and Emma at the time when they, as female founders, and the same sort of analysis was coming up from that perspective.
And since then, there's been a change in government and taxation policy, hasn't there? That's affected funding as well. Do you want to explain? I don't know the exact details of that.
Well, so I saw a really interesting post on LinkedIn about R&D tax credits and the amount of time that's taking to reimburse. A lot of female-founded businesses don't have the cash flow capacity to wait out for those funding opportunities, and I think that's a real shame. So we are a member of an organisation called We Connect International. So they exist to support women-owned businesses working with large corporates and driving business into the hands of women. That has been fantastic for us in terms of enabling us to get in front of big pharma, who actually have a really positive drive for diversifying their supply chains and ensuring that they have women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses as part of their suppliers, because as soon as you have a diverse supplier portfolio, that is going to support those perhaps smaller businesses.
What is Femtech and why does it matter?
Femtech is a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but the way that I define Femtech, I have a very, very broad definition of it, and I'm moving away from the terminology a little bit. I've always found it a little bit problematic because I do find it a bit exclusionary. But to me, it's anything that differently or disproportionately affects women or those from minority backgrounds. So yes, the really obvious stuff, anything to do with pregnancy, childbirth, reproductive health, etc. Obviously, menopause, menstrual cycles. Yes, that's women's health. But we are differently or disproportionately affected by autoimmune diseases, by Alzheimer's. Even the way that we have heart attacks is different from men. So we present them very differently. So how we know to identify a heart attack, for example, tightening of chest, painful left arm, that's not how it is. No, that's
really?
Not how it presents in a woman.
We also don't go to hospital as quickly. We try to deal with it a bit. Yeah, it's quite an interesting one, cardiology. But even when we get to hospital, the 80% of the cardiologists are male, and we tend not to get the follow-up treatment that men would either. And there was a really interesting study that looked at the last 10 years of data. And if women had been treated the same way as men, there would have been 8,000 more survival.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, 8,000 women died because they were treated differently to men over a 10-year period in cardiology.
It's interesting because I'm looking again, statistical analysis here, and subsector from a femtech company point of view, and cardiology isn't even on there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the way that sex and gender impacts on health is not just in those areas of kind of pregnancy, reproduction, menopause. It's in every disease area you can talk about. And that's often because, you've got estrogen receptors that are everywhere in your body, including your brain. That might be why Alzheimer's outcomes and presentation is different. So, the underlying physiology is different, but then the way that women interact with the healthcare system and are treated by the healthcare system is often different too.
Yeah. And I also, within Femtech, I take other things outside of women's health. So in the report, you'll see FinTech in there, particularly we highlighted in our 2024 report a company that helps LGBTQ couples to bank and save so that they can get fertility treatment, for example, because it's particularly difficult to earn enough money, pay for fertility treatment, and to actually just get the financial support to get there if you're from an LGBTQ community. So there's a lot of things within that. We also have social media networks like DM, which help women to identify and share information as well. So for me, Femtech is a very, very broad term, and anything that differently or disproportionately affects women or people from minority backgrounds.
I would love to get, for our audience out there, we'll take some notes of these groups. And
yeah, well, you can download the report. It's free now. So
there you go. You've heard it here. The reports are free on the Ultra.
It's very good. I've read it.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Ultraviolet.agency. And there's 3 reports on there at the moment. And our 2035 report is going to be published in June.
How long does it take to gather all of that information together for the 2035?
It depends on what you mean. I mean, we're always gathering information. So for the last 3 years, we've been gathering information and speaking to people. Everything will be informed. All of our conversations, everything that we do informs our reports. But really dedicated time is about 3 to 4 months.
Is that information easy to come by?
We have a very robust methodology that we use.
Don't give your secrets away.
Of a futures methodology. Hey, listen, I could tell you everything, and you could still get a different outcome, right? I could tell you blow by blow exactly how I'm going to go about my report, and you could still get a different outcome. Because the thing about futures is it's not prediction. We're not here to tell you what the future would look like. We're here to tell you what the future could look like. And I am very open and honest about the fact that I come from a bias. Like, I want the best possible outcome for women. And I think it's important that we look at what the best possible future could look like. And we talk about those ones, not the one that can be the most exploitative, or not the one that can be the most lucrative, the one that can be the best. And that's what I put into the world, right? And I think it's very important. It comes from a methodological background. It's grounded in both quantitative and qualitative data research. So if you talk about if it's easy to come by, there's a lot of data out there. So yes, there is data readily available, but you have to comb through it. You have to know what you're looking for. You have to know how to cluster and how to organize and how to understand what you're looking at. And then I do a big qualitative piece as well, where I speak with experts across multiple different industries, not just women's health, not just femtech, multiple different industries to look at what do these impacts, these trends, these early signals, what could they mean for women? What could they mean for women's health? What could they mean for femtech? And we use all of this to inform what the final report looks like. So when you have a 10-year forecast, they're really interesting because they can be quite speculative. And I really am using this as an opportunity to say this is the best possible future for women in 2035.
The quote here on this analysis sheet, which is from a prominent sort of well-established organisation, and coming back to you want the best outcome, not from a monetary or capital point of view. The dollars are massive when you invest in women's health, venture capitalists say. And that's written on Yahoo Finance. Now, look, source-wise, we don't know, but
look,
frustrating.
I'm not anti-profit by any stretch of the imagination. I work with for-profit companies as well as lots of other kinds of organisations. It's just not. It's not the primary outcome that I'm looking for when I'm looking at women's health outcomes. Obviously,
I don't think any of us want that, do we? I think money is a result of what you do rather than why you do it. Am I?
We don't have a mission. We don't have a mission without profit. We can't do our pro bono work without working with the for-profit companies. But that is exactly what the B Corp movement would say, that there are, other and arguably better measures of business success than profit. But you have to have profit to have a strong foundation to move forward.
I suppose from my mentality here, I'm kind of looking at it is, you talk about the lack of equal funding, should we say, in sort of femtech space as a whole, and it's kind of like it may now get more investment because it's a hot topic, so to speak. And should it be that way or should it not be that way?
Well, it's very exciting that it's a hot topic, and we are really pleased that venture capitalists are interested in this area. But one of the reasons that I started a trend forecasting agency was because we were seeing this big influx of money and this big influx of interest into the space by people who don't necessarily have a deep understanding of what the needs are, what the needs will be, and aren't necessarily coming at it from a conscientious perspective and possibly just a financial perspective. And even without that, I think it's really important that we allow people to understand all of the possible futures, because otherwise, I can't expect every venture capitalist to be a femtech expert. There's no point in that. I can be the femtech expert, and it's my job to inform them of what to do and how to do it and what's going to be really interesting and what's needed. So I take that job very seriously.
There's a lot of influence there then, isn't there?
Yeah. I hope so.
Are you feeling positive about the future?
Oh yeah. It's really, really exciting. And actually the work that I'm doing is really exciting and it is really interesting. And I think we will start to see a really powerful change in the way that we not just talk about the way that we develop. And I think we will begin to see a systematic change, because we're seeing changes from the clinical and research side right the way through to the for-profit and commercial side
absolutely.
as well. And from women as well, what we're asking for, what we expect, what we demand is changing. And we do expect more from businesses, from our clinicians, from our friends, from ourselves. And it's going to be a really, from what I can see,
spoiler.
Spoiler alert, 2035 is going to be amazing.
But I think that's been driven as well by just better awareness of women's health issues, and that is via social media often. But the ability for women to have formed communities online and to recognise that there are other women out there with the same condition, the same experiences of the healthcare system, has allowed women to have a better voice in this space, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's multi-channel.
Yeah.
The way this has moved, and even from a cultural perspective as well, the way that we talk about these things in movies, the way that consent is handled, even programs like sex education, even being able to have real period blood in a tampon advert, for example. All of these things are a big move.
But there are still aspects of women's health that aren't portrayed well on TV, in my experience. So I'm a breastfeeding peer supporter. I do that every Wednesday morning, but you do not see good examples of women breastfeeding, and particularly not breastfeeding for a longer period of time, sort of, toddlers. You just don't see that on telly. And normalization of breastfeeding is really important. We've got the lowest rate of breastfeeding in the world in the UK, because the support just isn't there.
What is
and we don't
breastfeeding
see
support?
We don't see it. We don't see people breastfeeding.
No, we absolutely don't.
Usually, by the time we begin breastfeeding, we haven't really sat down and looked or seen or been around people breastfeeding all that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a protected human right to be able to breastfeed in public. Yes, it's the
some people
absolutely
have a real issue with it, don't they?
I think other people, can have an issue with it. I think many women who haven't been exposed to breastfeeding before, if you're having to do it in public, that's really hard for the people who are breastfeeding. I think that has got better, but I think what a lot of people don't understand is that it's a learned skill. It's a skill for both the baby and the mum, and you need to be taught and supported. And there isn't that support in my experience, and it's supposed to be natural, but actually it's quite as humans, we lost the ability quite early on in our evolutionary history to just breastfeed instinctively. So our social network supported us in kind of, prehistoric times. You would have had the people who breastfed before teaching you how to breastfeed. That doesn't exist anymore. Women are much more isolated in their kind of maternity experience, and it's tough.
It's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, and the funding for
mental health.
Well. There's no support. There's no government funding for the breastfeeding support groups that I attend, or on charity donations.
Is there scientific documentation to say it's better to breastfeed a child than it is not to?
So if that is the kind of gold standard of infant feeding, if you can't breastfeed, then absolutely formula is a brilliant substitute and has saved many, many lives. And it's also a woman's choice whether they breastfeed or not. But I think the biological benefits of it have been underplayed and potentially suppressed by a formula industry that has a commercial gain for pushing that formula. But yeah, and it's not just nutrition, it's attachment, it's kind of mental health for both the mother and the baby. So yeah, I could talk quite a lot about breastfeeding, but I don't want to turn this into kind of breastfeeding or not debate. But yeah,
cutting into your ambitions from an organisational point of view, what's your 3, 5, 10-year forecast for yourself? What's the trend coming up?
So as I mentioned earlier, the last few years have been very much about pivoting and repositioning and focusing on being agile as a business. So post-COVID, I've only worked with freelancers and contractors, and really I'm looking to turn that around now and build out my core team. So as I mentioned, I'm going to have 2 key hires by the end of the year, future specialists, and because we work directly one-to-one with clients, we have 3 predominant ways you can work with us. We have our reports. Up to now have been annual reports. Then obviously we're having our 10-year report, which I'm really excited about. So downloading the reports. Then the 2 other main ways of working with us is we build out workshops with businesses. So you can have kind of off-the-shelf workshops, understanding futures thinking, the future of femtech, the future of digital health, future of the key macro trends that we've identified. We do specialized workshops as well with businesses. And then we have longer strategic thinking pieces as well, 5-10-year strategies where we really get to understand the foundations, the beating heart of an organization, and help them to understand really what they need to do to prepare for that future female consumer over the next 5 to 10 years. So those really big strategic pieces is where we're focusing a lot of our energies now. And we've had some really fantastic clients up to now. And building out those opportunities. So we work, predominantly with, big pharma, women's health, mental health, femtech, health and wellness, retail, sports and leisure, those sorts of businesses, anyone that really is focused on doubling down on kind of women's health and really supporting that future female consumer in her health and well-being, and helping them to build out their 5 to 10 year strategies. So that's really the goal for the next year. And then over the next 10 years is really helping to realise that ambition of the best possible world for women. It's really, really important to me to provide intersectional access to femtech support and to women's health support. As you mentioned earlier, 51% of femtech companies are in America, but the majority of the rest of them are in the UK and the EU. And actually, there are millions, billions of women who are not accessing, who don't have easy access to very, very basic areas of support and women's health support. So it's really important to me to build out an integrated and accessible health solutions for women. So being a part of that movement.
And Elaine, yourself, where's the sort of focal point from a growth perspective for the Salve?
So we're coming up to our 2nd birthday.
Congratulations and
thank
happy
you very
birthday.
Much. And
Never
Prosecco. Yeah, we have really concentrated on establishing our business model as a remote agency and making sure all our systems work and our kind of network of associates are working well together in a remote environment. We have a sort of 5-year strategy for growth in the shorter term. 10 years, we'd love to be moving into more of a consulting space rather than a traditional service delivery and content delivery model. But I think that takes a bit of a longer time to establish yourself as a business and being known in the industry for that. Particularly on the therapy area front, women's health is obviously a big one for us. We would like to be working more in the neglected tropical diseases space because we think that is another kind of underfunded, neglected part of health globally. Rare diseases as well in that too. And we think there's kind of a growing need for a focus on climate and health. So pharma, biotech, looking at how climate change is going to change their portfolios. Mm-hmm. It might change disease progression or the natural history of a disease. And all that needs kind of scenario planning, looking at how that's going to fall out into kind of the commercial space.
It's definitely an episode for the future.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
So you're remote at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you see that continuing in 5 years' time, or do you see having a central base?
I think it will definitely continue for the moment. It's working very well in terms of ensuring that we have really experienced medcoms professionals, and they do tend to be those with 15 years plus experience, but they also come with families. And it's just where traditional agency life has not worked well for those individuals, and they've maybe left to go freelance. So we think we provide a working environment that is a win-win for our clients in terms of experience, but also working really well with the people that we're employing. So a bit like Anna, we've been kind of cautious in taking headcount on just while the economic environment is so uncertain, but definitely 2, possibly 3 key hires by the end of this year, I think would be a really good place for us.
And is that in the medical writing space?
Yeah, medical writing. So there's kind of 3 areas that we deliver in. Scientific publications is probably 1/3 of our business, meetings and events, and then digital medical education. And we really love the publication space. We think that's kind of a really interesting area with, not just having the traditional scientific paper, but what goes around that. So enhanced article features, enabling healthcare professionals to access that data quicker. They're busy, they have a real lack of time, they can't always read a full clinical paper. How do you make that content accessible? And also, how do you make it accessible for the public? So we've just done some research that we published at a congress on plain language summaries and how patients can access clinical trial data in a way that they can understand.
Anna, if we want to find out more about you and our audience wants to learn that little bit more, where are you most prominent from a platform point of
LinkedIn.
view? LinkedIn.
Yeah, I know I'm getting old when my most prominent platform, I start scrolling on LinkedIn rather than Instagram. I'm just /Anna Butterworth or ultraviolet.agency, and all the links are there.
We'll put this links in the description for you. And how about yourself, Elena? Where were you most prominent?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn too. So I'm Elena.Mills on Instagram or LinkedIn, and then we're theselfhealth.com.
Thank you for coming in today, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
Super interesting.
Great.
So informative. You could go down rabbit holes with this topic, can't you?
Which is why we're in the clock.
Totally.
That's exactly why we've got a timer in the background. For those of you that I was going to say that one listener, that was my kind of running joke, but I think there's a few more.
We had 1,100 on the first.
Yeah, we did. So for those 1,100 listeners, we have got a clock in front of us from the videographing team and our fantastic hosts here at Soup Studios, who are making sure we're on time. So we know how or where people can find you, should I say. Anna, tell us how people can work with you, please.
Sure. So a number of ways you can engage with us. You can download our reports. We're available for consulting hours, workshops, which I mentioned before. And also we do the strategic foresight work as well with businesses. I also do a lot of speaking opportunities. So I've got a number of really exciting engagements coming up this year. And I'm always available to talk about femtech, the future of women's health, anything to do with that. If you want to bring me on, I'm there.
Heard it here. And Elena, please.
So we do love chatting with our clients and brainstorming ideas. So I would say one of the best ways to find out about us is drop us a line, arrange a discovery call. We like kind of chewing the fat around business challenges, seeing what there is, what space is being neglected, where are the opportunities. And similar to Anna, I love talking about kind of the underlying data requirements of driving this space forward. And that's where our kind of business forte is in communicating the clinical trial data to healthcare professionals and the public.